welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm your host, Emma Thomas, and this time I'm really delighted to welcome along Cindy Gallop. Cindy's a brand and business innovator, consultant, coach and keynote speaker, and the founder of MakeLoveNotPorn, which we'll come back to a bit later. But Cindy, I think I first became aware of you about 2 years ago when I saw your Star Like You video on social media, like so many other people. It's been watched now, I think, 250,000 times on YouTube and probably even more on Instagram and TikTok. Has that had a big impact on your life since it sort of went viral?
To be perfectly frank, Emma, it hasn't had a big impact on my life, but it seems to have had a big impact on a lot of other people's lives, which is great. So to your point, and for the benefit of our listeners, what Emma's referencing is a wonderful series of interviews done by a brand called Star Like You, termed What's Underneath, which is where they invite the interviewee to sit on a stool in front of the camera. They ask questions from behind the camera, and as you answer each question, you remove an item of clothing. The idea being to both metaphorically and literally strip down to what's underneath.
It's an amazing series. If you're listening, you've never seen any of them, as soon as you finish listening to this, go and watch a couple because, yeah, they are amazing.
And they do this with different segments. So they have a whole couples series, but they asked me to participate in the older people section of What's Underneath, which I was very happy to do. And as you say, this was a couple of years ago. I was 62. I took all my clothes off, right down to my underwear. And, I was really blown away by the responses. As you mentioned, Emma, I went viral on TikTok. I mean, I wasn't even on TikTok.
Without even trying.
but the clips of this interview have millions of views, thousands of comments. There are 900 stitches, versions of me in clips from this interview on TikTok, many of them featuring the Gen Z meme, I have seen my future and it is bright. And I think what really blew me away was the number of comments under the video on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, where so many people said, this is the older female role model I've been looking for all my life. And women said that, but also a ton of men said that as well. And I was especially moved by a comment under the video on Instagram, where one woman said, imagine if we had grown up seeing and hearing women live and talk like this, imagine how very different our lives would be now. Mm-hmm. And all of that speaks to the scarcity of older female role models that are actually, first of all, given that kind of exposure, because popular culture, as we all know, does not welcome us. And so, we are not the ones featured in the pages of magazines and going viral on social media generally. And so I think because, there are many other older women like me living wonderful lives. And it's just that we don't get seen enough. And so when we are, that's the response. It demonstrates how much people want to see many more of us.
So who would have been your role model growing up?
My mother. My mother is amazing. My mother's Chinese, Malaysian Chinese. And it's a huge shame that, she is one of 10 brothers and sisters, born in Malaysia, and, born into a generation where, the boys all got to go to university and the girls all went to teacher training college, because that was how things worked then. And, I really wish, if my mother could have gone to university, she would be a global tycoon, because that's how sharp her business brain is. As it was, she became a teacher. She always worked. So, my sisters and I always had that working mother role model. And honestly, she just always had the best advice. Equally obviously, as a daughter, one did not necessarily wish to listen to it. One wishes one had done so much more. But my mother absolutely was my first and best role model.
My mum similarly had a brother who was sent to grammar school, and I'm sure she was no less able, but it just wasn't even a consideration. Yep. It's like, off you go to secretarial college.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll get married and have babies. That's it, job done.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough to hear you speak recently at the Upfront and Centre Day run by Lauren Curry, which is absolutely fantastic. And there were sort of very many sort of eager, receptive women in the audience who were absolutely kind of punching the air at all of your messaging, I think. Tell us a bit more then about Make Love Not Porn for anyone who's not heard of it before. Could you explain the premise but yeah, basically what made you decide to set that up?
Sure. So the answer, very frankly, Emma, is nothing made me decide per se, in the sense that Make Love Not Porn was an accident. I did not consciously, intentionally set out to do anything I very bizarrely find myself doing now. It came about because I date younger men. And I will just explain for the benefit of our listeners that I am somebody who has never, ever wanted to be married. I have never wanted children. Very glad that I always knew that as opposed to finding out the hard way by having them. I adore being single. I am not a relationship person. I cannot wait to die alone. And I date younger men casually and recreationally for sex. And I'm deliberately public about all of that per our previous conversation because, as I said, we don't have enough role models to demonstrate that you can live life very differently from the way you're expected to and still be amazingly happy. And I'm one of the happiest people I know. So there I was, dating younger men about 16, 17 years ago, when I began realizing through my own personal experience that when we don't talk openly and honestly about sex, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. And it's important to bear in mind that 16, 17 years ago, nobody was talking about this. No one was writing about it. This was me in isolation, identifying this, and as a naturally action-oriented person thinking, wow, I'm going to do something about this. So 15 years ago, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at MakeLoveNotPorn.com that in its original version was kind of a public service announcement. Porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched at the TED conference in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to say the words "come on my face" on the TED stage 6 times in succession.
And I've seen the video, and you do at least give people the opportunity to cover their ears if they're of a nervous disposition.
Exactly. The talk went viral as a result of that, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from all around the world, a ton of people from the UK, and I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I then felt I had a responsibility to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that would make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. And so I turned it into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously, which is what I believe the future of all business should be ultimately. And so today, Make Love Not Porn is the world's first and only user-generated and importantly 100% human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So we're kind of what Facebook would be if it allowed you to openly, healthily, socially and sexually self-express, which it clearly doesn't. The way to think about us is, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex we're all having in the real world. And what we're doing is we are socializing, normalizing, and destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration. And it's important to say, Emma, given the context of this podcast now audience, that obviously, as somebody who is now 64, when I concepted this, I absolutely concepted it to celebrate the wonderful sex we all have as we get older, and to totally negate the idea that when you get older you don't have sex, which is ridiculous. So we have a number of amazing older Make Love Not Porn stars, as we call our contributors. We have a ton of older members who write to us and say, my husband and I have been married for like 30 years. We are so thrilled that you are showcasing the fact that you can carry on having great sex at our age. And also it's important to say that, as a unique business, Make Love Not Porn has a unique power. We have the ability to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that nothing else can. And so, over the 11 years we've operated as a business, we've taught countless young people that porn is not sex in the real world. Gen Z loves us. We have saved numerous marriages and relationships. And that is literally how people write to us. You saved my marriage. One woman wrote to us and she said, my husband and I have been married for 20 years. And, sex had gone down to once every 2 or 3 months, if that. She said, this is the best $10 a month I've ever spent. That's our subscription. It starts at $10, £7 a month. So it's very affordable. She said, in the first month of subscribing to Make Love Not Porn, we had sex 8 times. Fantastic.
It's a good return on investment.
Exactly. But the really important thing, Emma, is she said it's not just the sex. She said, we now feel more intimate, more connected, closer to each other than ever before, and more in love than ever before. And she ended her email, thank you for saving my marriage. So that is literally what we have the power to do.
What do you think some of that is? Is it about freeing people from shame and stigma? Is it kind of getting people out of a rut? Is it a kind of a bit of both of those things and something else?
Yeah, but I think it's all those and more, because basically when I decided to turn Make Love Not Porn into this business, I've been saying for 15 years, the issue isn't porn, the issue is that we don't talk about sex in the real world. Because if we did, people could then bring a real world mindset to the viewing of what is simply performative, produced, scripted entertainment. And so, I decided that Make Love Not Porn's mission needed to be to make it easier for every single person in the world to talk openly and honestly about sex. And to facilitate that, I decided very simply to take every dynamic in social media and apply them to this one area of universal human experience that no other social network platform allows. So as I said, we are socializing and normalizing sex in the real world. And what couples tell us is, that means our videos are absolutely designed to be watched together with social sex. And one couple wrote and said, watching your videos on Make Love Not Porn, it felt as natural and normal to talk about what we're seeing in them as it would be to talk about something we're watching on Netflix. And from there, it was just one step to talking about our own sex life and having really amazing communication breakthroughs because of that. So I think that's a key part of it. Couples tell us all the time that we inspired amazing conversations between them, including, by the way, when they look at Make Love Not Porn and think, ooh, this could be fun. Why don't we video ourselves and share it on Make Love Not Porn? And, couples who do that tell us that it doesn't matter how long you've been together. When you decide to participate, you have to talk about it. And when you talk about it, the conversation goes places it's never, ever gone before. Couples write to us and say, we thought we were close and we were really open. Doing this just took our relationship to a whole new level, which is really interesting as well. And then there is absolutely the ability to see. We answer the question that everyone has asked since the dawn of time, which is, what is everybody else really doing in bed? At last, Make Love Not Porn shows you. And that is wonderfully inspiring. It is genuinely educational. I'll give you an example, but because everything we do at Make Love Not Porn is consciously intentionally done with, as I said, this end goal to make it easier to talk about sex. So we are building a new vocabulary for real world sex at Make Love Not Porn, a new way to talk about sex to make it easier to communicate around it. We tag our videos completely differently to the way that porn sites do. And to give an example of what I mean, so when we were building Make Love Not Porn, I said to my team, I want us to find a term for the female version of blowjob that is as quick, easy, and simple to say. because blowjob has made its way into the vernacular. It's perfectly natural to say blowjob all the time. And cunnilingus doesn't hack it. Okay, oral sex. So at Make Love Not Porn, our tag for the female version of blowjob is lick job. It's as quick, easy, and simple to say. And that's important, Emma, because when something is quick, easy, and simple to say, it gets said a lot more, it gets asked for a lot more, and it happens a lot more. And our lick job videos are very popular on Make Love Not Porn because this is real world sex. These are real world lick jobs where, as my friend sex nerd Sandra says, if your eyebrows aren't wet, you're not doing it right.
Awesome. So thinking about the sort of the mechanics of how people sort of submit, what's the sort of the process that people go through if they want to kind of create content and submit it?
Sure. And so, I'm gonna contextualize my response in the broader tech landscape as a whole, Emma, because I think this is something that's very important for many more people to understand. So the young white male founders of the giant tech platforms that dominate all our lives today, they are not the primary targets, online or offline, of harassment, abuse, sexual assault, violence, racism, rape, revenge porn. Therefore, they did not and they do not proactively design for the prevention of any of those things on their platforms. And we see the results of that around us every single day. Those of us who are most at risk every single day, women, Black people, people of color, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, we design safe spaces and safe experiences, but we don't get funded. Only 1.7% of all venture capital last year went to female founders, and that is why we have still not yet seen what the future of the internet can be when it's designed and built through the female lens at scale. And I say that because I designed Make Love Not Porn through the female lens to be the safest place on the internet. That's because I designed it around what everybody else should have, nobody else did, human curation. There is no self-publishing of anything on Make Love Not Porn. Our curators watch every frame of every video submitted from beginning to end before we approve or reject, and we publish it. No one else does that. We review every post on every member profile. And by the way, on Make Love Not Porn, your posts can be as safe work or not safe work as you like. But we review them, we approve or reject, and we publish them. No one else does that. We review every comment on every video before we approve or reject and publish it. No one else does that. We can vouch for every single piece of content on our platform in a way that nobody else can. And the important thing about that, Emma, is that we're tiny, bootstrapping, have no money, and we've human curated everything for 11 years.
Which is expensive.
And it's not just that. So when you submit a video to Make Love Not Porn, we require that it be fully legal, consensual, everyone's over 18. We require 2 forms of government-issued ID from every participant. And by the way, every other adult site on the internet only requires 1. We require 2. Including, by the way, if you've chosen to have somebody else behind the camera. Even if you never see them, we have to know exactly who they are, 2 forms of government-issued ID. Also, on Make Love Not Porn, it's absolutely fine to be anonymous. Okay, if you're worried about your employer, whatever, wear masks, faces in shadow, out of frame. But if you submit an anonymous video, we ask you to submit alongside it a photograph of you showing your face, holding your government-issued visual ID up next to your face. So we know exactly who you are. No one else does that. Then, when you've passed all our paperwork checks, we've watched your video, we're going to publish it. Before we do that, we email every participant in the video separately to make 100% sure that every person has consented to this video being published. We email both halves of a couple. We email each person a threesome. Nobody else anywhere on the internet does this, by the way. When you submit your first video, we've approved it, we publish it. We begin building a relationship with you from day one. We know who every single one of our Make Love Not Porn stars is, and we have wonderful relationships with them. We send out monthly newsletters, we organize remote gatherings on Zoom. We designed Make Love Not Porn around enormous respect for our community to make them feel completely safe. And, what's very interesting about that, Emma, is, as I mentioned, we are transformative in our power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior. And as with any disruptive technology, use cases emerged for it that the founder never dreamt of. So I was blown away when we first began hearing, as we do regularly, from survivors of rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse. We hear from female survivors, male survivors, trans non-binary survivors. They tell us that Make Love Not Porn helped them reclaim their bodies. We help them feel able to be sexual again post-trauma in a situation where porn is way too triggering. And it's not just people who watch our videos. We have several Make Love Not Porn stars who've told us that being able to share themselves sexually in a completely safe and trustworthy space has helped them process and heal from sexual trauma. That's not a use case I ever envisaged when I came up with this concept, but I'm so grateful and humbled that it is.
It's not something that I'd ever really thought about before, but that whole that whole kind of, it's almost like a labor of love, isn't it? You really are caring very deeply. I can tell by the way you're talking about it, about this entire kind of end to end process, and it's not so much of a, the other sites that you're sort of talking about, it's a commodity. It's it's literally like a sausage factory. I mean, no pun intended.
Yeah, literally.
Like, how quickly can we get it out, out the door and start making money on it? I want to move on because I know that you've talked about this as well, about the exposure of children, sometimes as young as 9 or 10 to porn, and you referenced you quoted a Guardian article which I'll link in the show notes actually, and I think that's a huge concern for lots of parents, myself included, that that there's ready access to some pretty dark and unpleasant stuff, and we very hard for us to police that, to kind of to restrict children from finding that, and in some cases they don't even have a choice. It's it really is just sort of shoved in front of them and without any warning. Is that how do you see Make Love Not Porn addressing some of that?
So parents and teachers began writing to me from day one of Make Love Not Porn. And so I'm delighted to say that just this year, we have just launched our first ever equity crowdfunding campaign. And it's our first ever equity crowdfunding campaign because historically, no crowdfunding platform would allow us to use their services. So I would love our listeners to go to wefunder.com/MakeLoveNotPorn, because we are raising funding there to build what parents and teachers have been asking me for years, which is the 0 to 18 and beyond sex education expansion of Make Love Not Porn. MakeLoveNotPorn.academy. I bought that URL many years ago, and if our listeners go to MakeLoveNotPorn.academy, you'll see my full vision laid out there. And the good news is that, on WeFunder, we're targeting just over $1 million. I think that's about £700,000. We're about a third of the way along at the moment. We would love everyone to contribute what they can. The minimum investment is $100, 70 quid. So it's a relatively small amount. But what this will enable us to do is build Make Love Not Porn Academy, which is what I characterize as the Khan Academy of Sex Education. Because Khan Academy, the global online tutoring platform, tutors on every other topic under the sun except this one. Educational technology, EdTech, is exploding as a category, not in this area. So the plan with Make Love Not Porn Academy is to build it on the same principles as Make Love Not Porn, user-generated, crowdsourced, curated revenue share. Because I'm not about reinventing the wheel. This is an aggregation play. I want to build the go-to global hub for the best of the world's sex education content. And so when we build the academy, which I'm hoping we'll be able to put something out publicly in a few months' time, we invite educators all around the world to share with us their own content. Coursework materials, books, videos, comic strips. And I use the term educator very broadly, not just sex educators, but sexual health and wellness experts, therapists, health professionals, anybody informing and educating in this entire area. Now, we will curate. At the heart of everything we do lies human curation. Human eyes will vet every piece of content to make sure it's safe. We endorse it. And we will then publish all of this segmented by age appropriateness. So if you're a parent freaking out going, oh my God, my 6-year-old just asked this, what do I say? We will provide you with the age appropriate tools and content to be able to have that conversation with a 6-year-old. If you're a teacher of the class of 14-year-olds, here are your age appropriate teaching materials. If you're an adult, access all areas. Adults are just as desperate for information as well. But the key thing, Emma, is that the academy will be where children and young people can access sex education without parental teacher gatekeeping. And here's why that's important. I have a friend who's a mother, and as you have to these days, she monitors her kids' browsing history. This happened a few years ago. Her son was 8 years old, and she saw to her horror that on the family computer, he had Googled sex for children. So she freaked out, but did the right thing. Stayed calm, sat him down, darling, I see you were looking at this. Talk me through why. This anecdote is adorable and horrifying in equal measure because her son wanted to learn about sex. He was a child. He knew he was a child. He wanted to learn about sex in a child-appropriate way. He sweetly, innocently Googled sex for children. You can imagine what came back, utterly traumatized. And so the academy will be where an 8-year-old boy can enter his age, and we will only serve him age-appropriate content. Now, some of this will be free to access per that example, but we'll also charge to download, subscribe, bulk buy if you're a school. There are different revenue streams for different use cases. And the important thing about that, Emma, is, we'll take a percentage, but that revenue will go directly to the educators. And that's because right now, no one goes into sex education to make money. I have friends all around the world, many in the UK, by the way, who are brilliant sex educators. They face all the same challenges I do. Their content gets blocked on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Their accounts get suspended. They're banned from advertising. They can't even make a living doing this. They've had to take other jobs to survive. And I want to change that because this is enormously valuable work. And, what will also be great about the Academy is that we plan to generate some of our own educational material, because there are 2 pieces of advice that I've been giving to parents for years. And I can't wait to put myself in the Academy saying this on video so that everyone can benefit. But I'm going to share them with you, Emma, for the benefit of our listeners, because they may find this useful. So the 2 things I say to parents are, first of all, today, for the reasons you've just outlined, you cannot begin talking to your child about sex too early. And when I say that, I don't mean literally talk about sex. What I mean is, the very first time your child asks where babies come from, plays with their genitals, the most important thing isn't even what you say as much as how you say it. Never, ever get visibly flustered. Okay? Never get embarrassed. Never get annoyed. Never shut the conversation down, change the topic, leave the room. Instead, answer them calmly, straightforwardly, honestly. And you will open up a channel of communication that will be there for them and you for the rest of their lives. Because the one thing parents want above everything else is for their child to be happy. This area will impact your child's happiness more than virtually anything else. And then the second thing I say to parents is today, again, for the reasons you've outlined, the very first time you talk to your child about sex, you must also talk to your child about porn. And this is much easier to do than parents think, because all you have to do is basically provide a version of what I'm about to share with you, and you dial it up or down depending on the age of the child. So you say, so darling, we've just talked about sex. And you know how together we watch movies and videos and cartoons where things happen that aren't real. Well, there are also movies and videos about sex, and they're not real either. And because of that, they can be quite confusing. So we'd rather not watch until you're older. But if anybody ever shows you anything like that, or you stumble across it, come and talk to us, come and talk to me. I can explain it.
That is brilliant.
You can end the conversation right there. Because just by saying that, Emma, you've done 2 very important things. The first is you've set up in their heads when they stumble across porn, as they will, it's not real. And the second thing is you've said, come and talk to me about it. And you'll want them to do that because, to your point, what they stumble across can be utterly traumatizing.
And so you're taking that kind of the shame, the stigma out right from the beginning. No, that is so simple. I'm completely stealing that. That's brilliant.
Yep.
I've got a almost 14-year-old boy and a almost 11-year-old girl. So yeah, and I'll make sure we put a link to the
Academy.
crowdfunding campaign as well
Fantastic.
in the show notes.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
A little bit of change of pace. When I said on LinkedIn I was going to interview you, I asked for people if they had any questions. So here's the one that I got back.
Great.
So somebody said it must be beyond frustrating, and you talked a little bit about this, when the things you've been fighting for so long are progressing at a slower rate than is possible. So the female funding, women in tech, digital safety. How do you maintain your dynamism and energy?
Well, I think I talked about this on the stage at Upfront Global, but basically two things keep me going. The first is every day our community writes to us or leaves comments on Make Love Not Porn to tell us how we changed their lives. Every day we see how vitally important the work that we're doing is. So that absolutely keeps me going.
Very motivating.
But secondly, it's a jolly good thing that the thing that most motivates me is the dynamic that I characterize as I'm going to fucking well show you. You tell me it can't be done, I'm going to fucking well show you. You put an obstacle path, I'm going to fucking well show you. I turn all of that daily demoralization and discouragement into motivation because I'm determined I'm going to fucking well show you.
Good. Rocket fuel. Love it. Your background was in advertising for decades. Do you feel like the tide is turning in terms of how, let's say, women kind of in our 50s and above are represented in and sold to in advertising?
The important thing to highlight here, Emma, is that do I feel the tide is turning is not the right way to ask that question, because that you've asked the question in the passive tense. Okay, all of this changes when you and I and everyone else make it change, and I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. And so I can tell you that I have been extremely vocal about the need for my industry to completely rethink its attitude towards age and to stop being ageist itself. And there are many other women and right-minded men absolutely fighting that battle alongside me as well. And so it is taking a very long time, but there are so many of us now battling ageism that I believe that going forwards you will absolutely see different representation. Because, I mean, two important things to say about that. The first is that something I've been saying to my industry for years is there's a huge opportunity to reinvent aspirational culture around this issue. Because what my industry gets wrong is, older people don't aspire to be young people aspire to be us. And as we saw, by the way, in the comments under my What's Underneath interview, because at this age, we don't give a shit. We know what's important in life, in relationships, in friendships. We are living life on our own terms. We have our own sense of personal style, our own sense of home style. We have a lot more freedom. All of that is enormously aspirational to younger people. And so there's a huge opportunity to tap into the aspiration of age instead of doing what, all brands do currently, which is go, let's lead with the young people, the older will follow. There's a huge opportunity to lead with older people, and the young will absolutely go, wow, I want to be like that. And that's why I coined the hashtag live older, because that's absolutely what so many younger people want to be doing. But then the second thing that's really important is when you tap into the aspiration of age, no one knows how better to do that than us. And so the answer isn't, young white male advertising creatives going, ooh, got to put older people in the ads. The answer is older people creating, directing, producing, photographing, and distributing the ads. And so that's why, I fly the flag for ending ageism in the advertising industry. Because when you end ageism in the industry, you have older people creating the ads. Then you have advertising that absolutely has the power to change societal attitudes and behavior and make society less ageist as well.
Bring it on. Fantastic. Well, that seems like a good place for us to wrap up. Cindy, thank you so much. As I said, we'll have links in the show notes where people can find out more. But yeah, it was an absolute joy catching up with you. And I'm going to go and I will watch back when I'm editing. I'm going to scribble down the gems of advice that you've given us for sort of having those conversations, difficult conversations, but in a simple way with kids. And I don't doubt that I'll be using those very soon. So thank you.
Excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure, Emma. Thank you for having me on.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.